Hello, and thank you for joining us for this very special World Elder Abuse Awareness Day Facebook Live event. I'm Sarah Hart-Weir, a special advisor for COVID-19 to the Missouri's Department of Health and Senior Services, as well as serve as the chair of the Missouri's Health Equity Committee. June 15th marks a very special day, World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. This is a global awareness day, which was officially introduced by the International Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse and the World Health Organization at the United Nations on this day in 2016. This important day is in support of the United Nations International Plan of Action that recognizes the significance of elder abuse as a public health and a human rights issue. It is observed every year to provide an opportunity for communities around the world to promote a better understanding and an increased awareness of the cultural, social, economic, and demographic processes affecting elder abuse and neglect. We know that no community or country in the world is immune from the mistreatment of our older adults. The color purple has been adopted as a symbol to raise awareness of elder abuse and the effects of abuse, neglect, bullying, exploitation, and later in life. Each year, we are asked to wear purple on June 15th to show our support in the worldwide effort to prevent elder abuse. Today, we have a very special panel discussion to help us not only recognize our 2022 World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, but also have a very timely discussion about our efforts here in the great state of Missouri to ensure older adults are protected from and safe from abuse, neglect, bullying, and exploitation. I'm honored to be joined by an esteemed panel, also all wearing purple in some form or fashion today. Melanie Hyland, Steve Bolin, Tim Jackson, Jerry Green, Christy Seiler, and Nicole Gatlin. Before we get started and to dive into today's discussion, I'm going to actually have our esteemed panelists introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their role. Melanie Hyland, do you want to jump in and introduce yourself first?
Of course. Good morning. My name is Melanie Hyland, and I'm the Director of the Division of Senior and Disability Services.
Steve, do you want to jump in and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Steve Bolin. I'm the Director of the Division of Regulation and Licensure for the Department of Health and Senior Services.
Thanks, Steve, for being here. Tim, do you want to jump in?
Hi, I'm Tim Jackson. I'm Section Administrator for the Section for Adult Protective Services.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for being here with us today. Jerry, do you want to jump in and introduce yourself?
Hello, it's my pleasure to be here today with all of you. My name is Jerry Green, and I'm the Bureau Chief of Intake and Investigations here at the Division of Health and Senior Services.
Thanks, Jerry. Christy, do you want to go next?
Hello, everyone. I'm Christy Seiler, and I'm the Bureau Chief for our Protective Service Unit within the Department of Health and Senior Services.
Last but certainly not least, Nicole, do you want to jump in?
Sarah, Nicole Gatlin, Bureau Chief of Adult Protective Services Support.
Melanie, let's start with you. Could you tell us how the Division of Senior and Disability Services addresses elder abuse in Missouri?
Of course. The Division of Senior and Disability Services, also known as DHSS, serves as the state unit on aging and carries out the mandates of the state regarding programs and services for our seniors and adults with disabilities. The role of DHSS is to ensure the protection of the elderly and disabled adults who are unable to provide or secure services for themselves by ensuring a safe and healthy environment. The division maintains the statewide toll-free hotline number at 1-800-392-0210 for reporting alleged abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation of persons aged 60 and older and adults with disabilities between the ages of 18 and 59. DSDS is also mandated by statute to investigate all reported abuse, neglect, and exploitation involving seniors and adults with disabilities living in the community who are unable to protect their own interests. These investigations are handled by our Section for Adult Protective Services. The Special Investigations Unit also investigates cases when there are allegations of physical abuse, sexual abuse, caregiver neglect, and/or financial exploitation that contain a criminal component. These cases often result in referrals to law enforcement agencies or prosecutors. APS can also provide resources and referrals even when they don't have the need to investigate. Some people may be reluctant to call the hotline if they're not sure if it is an investigatable situation. Knowing that APS can guide possible victims to resources in their community may also encourage them to make that call.
Thank you, Melanie. And if you could touch on why World Elder Abuse Awareness Day is so important to our division.
Well, in addition to getting a chance to wear some purple, it gives us a great opportunity to raise positive public awareness about the effects of abuse, neglect, and exploitation on older adults and shine a light on the great work that we do to protect vulnerable adults in Missouri. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm going to turn it over to my esteemed colleagues also at DSDS and also from our Division of Regulation and Licensure.
Steve, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more how the Division of Regulation and Licensure helps to combat elder abuse in facilities.
Sure, Sarah. So the Division of Regulation and Licensure regularly inspects licensed facilities to ensure that they're compliant with state and federal standards. And to define long-term care facilities, that includes skilled nursing, assisted living, residential, and intermediate care facilities. There are about 1,165 long-term care facilities with more than 81,000 beds that are licensed and inspected by the section for long-term care regulation within the division. And then within division, we have staff that investigate allegations of abuse, neglect, and exploitation that occur within those licensed facilities. Our surveyors last year investigated a total of about 2,500, nearly 2,600 reports involving allegations of abuse or neglect of residents of long-term care facilities. There were 1,400 facility self-reports last year. And then also through the Family Care Safety Registry, we assist long-term care facilities with obtaining background checks on potential long-term care facility employees. The goal with that is to ensure that only the safest and most caring individuals are hired to provide care for our elder residents.
Thank you, Steve. And if you could just dive a little deeper and tell us a little bit more about why Elder Abuse Awareness Day is so important to the division and the work that you do day in and day out.
Absolutely. So our role is to ensure quality care and safety at the long-term care facilities in Missouri. World Elder Abuse Awareness Day helps to highlight the critical role our surveyors play in identifying when care does not meet standards. We don't just regulate facilities for the sake of regulation. The end goal is to ensure that our seniors get the best care possible.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Steve, for that information. So now that we know a little bit about the department's role in investigating elder abuse, Tim, I was hoping that you could dive a little deeper as the section administrator for Adult Protective Services and tell us a little bit about what elder abuse looks like in the state of Missouri.
So elder abuse victims are our friends, neighbors, parents, grandparents, siblings, and loved ones. And the issue really cuts across race, gender, culture, and socioeconomic status. And unfortunately, it takes an unacceptable toll on individuals and families across our state. So elder abuse refers to an intentional or negligent act by a caregiver or a trusted individual that causes harm to an older person. So elder abuse takes many forms, including neglect. And this is when a caregiver fails to provide adequate assistance that the individual depends on, such as food, clothing, shelter, or necessary medical care. Abuse, of course, comes in multiple forms like physical abuse, mental, or sexual forms and can have physical or emotional signs tied to it. Financial abuse and exploitation is when someone takes advantage of an individual for personal benefit by either financial or legal means. And then, of course, self-neglect, what we deal with quite often, is a non-purposeful act where an individual fails to meet his or her own essential physical, psychological, or social needs. This threatens his or her health, safety, and well-being. So here in Missouri, we have a very robust response to adult abuse, neglect, and exploitation. And it starts out with our 18 call center agents at our Central Registry Unit, or as we commonly refer to it, the Adult Abuse and Neglect Hotline. These call agents receive numerous different kinds of reports and/or complaints regarding various types of agencies that our department serves, like home health, hospice, hospitals, health clinics, and dialysis centers, just to name a few. But most notably, our call agents take reports of abuse, neglect, and/or exploitation for those who are elderly, being defined as 60 and above, or are between the ages of 18 and 59 and have a disability and are unable to protect their own interests or adequately perform or obtain services necessary to meet his or her human needs. As Steve mentioned earlier, the Division of Regulations and Licensure investigates all long-term care facility complaints, whereas the section for Adult Protective Services within the Division of Senior and Disability Services, we respond to community-based reports of abuse, neglect, and/or exploitation with our 174 APS specialists around the state who respond to look into the validity of the allegations, and they look to provide support to the victim. Last year in Missouri, and for numerous years, the most common allegation that we encountered was self-neglect. And in those situations, our APS specialists are helping to link the person in need with services to help them live safely and independently in the least restrictive setting of their choice. Of course, many other situations reported involve someone inflicting some kind of abuse or exploitation, or neglecting caregiver responsibilities for a dependent person. Victims in these situations, they also need support, and these situations also often involve some kind of criminal act. And that's where our Special Investigation Unit comes in, which is comprised of 27 criminal investigators from around the state who ensure that law enforcement is aware of criminal allegations. They partner with law enforcement with needed and often complete investigations as a resource to law enforcement and county prosecutors. All in all, our goal is to provide support to victims of abuse, neglect, and exploitation, and to pursue justice for crimes perpetrated against those victims.
Thank you, Tim. Now that we have a really good understanding about elder abuse and what this looks like and the work that our state does from Tim's vantage point as the section administrator for Adult Protective Services, Christy, I was hoping you could jump in and tell us a little bit more about the leading causes of elder abuse.
Absolutely. Sarah, as people age, it can become increasingly difficult for them to stay involved and connected to their communities and families. As a result, older people are more likely to experience social isolation, which increases the likelihood of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Isolation can occur in multiple settings, such as a person's home, nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and even in hospitals. While any older person is potentially at risk of elder abuse, we know that some are more susceptible to experience abuse or neglect more so than others. Based on available information, women and people over the age of 80 are more likely to experience abuse. Factors include dementia, mental health, poor physical health, or substance abuse issues that can increase the likelihood of someone becoming isolated, which in turn puts them at greater risk of experiencing abuse and neglect.
Thank you, Christy. Nicole, I understand the Council on Aging estimates approximately 1 in 10 Americans aged 60 and older have experienced some form of elder abuse. Some estimate the range as high as 5 million elders who are abused each year. Can you just tell us a little bit more on how prevalent elder abuse is in the state of Missouri?
Sarah, in Missouri, during fiscal year 2021, the Department of Health and Senior Services received and investigated 42,422 reports of abuse, neglect, bullying, and exploitation involving seniors and adults with disabilities living in both the community and in facilities. Self-neglect represents 41% of the allegations for fiscal year 2021. 60% of our victims were over 60 years of age, and about 59% of our victims were female, out of those in which the gender was actually reported. 38% of victims were reported to have lived alone, and 25% were living with a relative.
And Nicole, is this an increase on the number of reports received over last year?
Yeah, Sarah, it is. The number of reported cases is steadily rising each year and increased by approximately 1,708 reports, which is a 4% increase from fiscal year 2020. Even with a steady increase, the extent of the problem is still vastly understated because the victim often has an emotional bond with the perpetrator. Seniors may be socially isolated and physically dependent on the perpetrator. Often that perpetrator is a son, daughter, or a caregiver, and that makes it nearly impossible for them to report for fear of losing their independence. The National Center on Elder Abuse estimates for every case of elder abuse or neglect reported to the authorities, as many as 23 cases go unreported.
Wow. Thank you so much, Nicole. You know, Christy, now that we have a better understanding of how large the problem is centered around elder abuse here in the state of Missouri, most importantly, what can we do to help address it, and how can we prevent it?
Sarah, the best way to address and prevent the problem is to report early. There are also many ways to get involved and for us to create a society that safeguards our communities and prevents elder abuse from even occurring. But first, we as a society need to talk more about the issue of elder abuse. We need to raise public awareness about how to identify abuse and how to report it. We need to provide older people who experience abuse with a safe environment to speak out and to tell their stories. We need to challenge injustice and ageist stereotypes. We need to develop enhanced services for older people who have experienced abuse, services targeted to prevent abuse and to reduce isolation amongst our seniors are very much needed. We need shelters and other support services specifically designed for older people who have been abused and who need to leave dangerous situations immediately. We need to improve training amongst our own adult protective services staff so they are better prepared to respond to the increasing numbers of elder abuse reports. Continuing to improve education for mandated reporters is also essential. What are the risk factors and red flags of abuse, and how to appropriately respond? Lastly, I would like to encourage everyone listening today to keep in contact and to talk with your older friends, neighbors, and relatives, to always be aware and alert for the possibility of abuse. Look around and take note of what's happening with your older neighbors and friends. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and don't be afraid to get involved and to reach out to our adult protective services staff.
Thank you, Christy. That was really great, helpful information on how we can jump in and prevent the abuse from happening from the start. Jerry, as manager of the Adult Abuse and Neglect Hotline, a very important job here in the great state of Missouri, can you tell us a little bit more on how we can report adult abuse in Missouri and what is needed to actually formally make that report?
Absolutely, Sarah. I'd be glad to. If you suspect abuse, neglect, bullying, or financial exploitation of the elderly or an adult with a disability, you can make a difference and call Missouri's toll-free adult abuse and neglect hotline at 1-800-392-0210. The hotline operates from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., 365 days a year. Or as an alternative to calling the hotline, you can also make a report online 24/7 at health.mo.gov/abuse at your convenience. We encourage all mandated reporters to enter the reports online, allowing greater accessibility to the hotline for the general public. In order to make that report, you will need the following information. Most importantly, the eligible adult's name, address, telephone number, sex, age, and general condition. It would also be helpful to have the alleged perpetrator's name, address, sex, age, relationship to the eligible adult, and condition. We'd also like to know the circumstances which led the reporter to believe that the eligible is being abused, neglected, or financially exploited, with as much specifics as possible. Whether the eligible adult is in immediate danger, the best time to contact the eligible adult, if he or she knows of the report, and if there's a danger to the worker going on out to investigate. The names of others with information about the situation. If the reporter is not a required reporter, whether he or she is willing to be contacted again, and any other relevant information that they think is important.
Thank you, Jerry. Those are all incredible, very helpful resources that we provide. Quick question as a follow-on to that. Aren't some people required to report in Missouri? If you could touch on that.
Yes, Sarah. Although anyone who suspects someone is being abused, neglected, or exploited can make a report, certain professionals, however, are mandated by law to report in Missouri. Some professionals required to report include law enforcement, first responders, many medical professions, social workers, employees of some state agencies such as Department of Health and Senior Services and the Department of Mental Health, area agencies on aging staff, and in-home service providers, owners, operators, and employees. A complete list of mandated reporting laws and mandated reporters can be found on our website at health.mo.gov. Mandated reporters, together with Adult Protective Services, play an important role in helping seniors with disabilities live lives free of abuse and neglect. For that reason, mandated reporters are required to report incidents to Adult Protective Services. And there are legal repercussions for failing to report suspected incidents of abuse, neglect, self-neglect, and exploitation. It's also important to note that identifying information of anyone who reports the abuse, neglect, or exploitation remains confidential by state law as well.
Thank you, Jerry. Thanks for taking that follow-on question. I want to kind of turn the conversation to maybe have Christy, if you and Jerry could maybe jump in on this particular one. Could you share any success stories from the last year when it comes down to the department's reports? And if you could share with us a little bit more about the success that you and your colleagues have had over the last year.
I'd be happy to. There are many, but I do have a couple that I would like to share with everyone today. Last year, we received a report alleging sexual abuse concerning a young disabled adult. It was reported that the parent of this individual was forcing her to engage in sexual acts in exchange for drugs. Our Protective Service Unit team member was persistent along with local law enforcement and was able to finally access the home. During the course of the investigation, the parent and other family member were charged with financial exploitation. Once they were incarcerated, a guardianship was pursued to ensure this young female's safety. She was able to receive the necessary medical treatment and is now residing safely in an environment where she is thriving and receiving the care she needs. Sarah, most recently, we received another report concerning a 90-year-old female with Alzheimer's suffering from malnutrition and neglect at the hands of her own daughter, who was also acting as her caregiver. In addition to not providing necessary care, the daughter was not paying the electric bill, which resulted in utilities being disconnected. Once our Protective Service Unit team member learned of the impending ice storm and extreme temperatures that were forecasted for the following day, she acted quickly and was able to convince the daughter to place her mother in a safe environment. The home was found to be in deplorable condition and was condemned, which prevented her from returning to this unsafe setting. As a result of this neglectful situation, the public administrator was appointed through the local court. I'm happy to report, Sarah, that she is now safe and her needs are being met. This is also a great example of what can be accomplished when multiple community agencies come together to ensure the safety of Missouri's most vulnerable adults.
And those are two very, very powerful stories. Jerry, did you have one or two stories that you wanted to share with the panel today?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. And Christy, excellent work done by the Protective Services Unit. As mentioned before, exploitation of the elderly is a report that receives second to self-neglect here at Adult Protective Services. And the Special Investigations Unit, which investigates allegations that are criminal in nature, exploitation compromises approximately 60% of our caseload. Recently, one of our investigators was assigned a case that resulted in a conviction of a Class A felony for a financial exploitation of the elderly disabled. This victim in this incident was 93 years old widower who lived in his home on 40 acres of prime farmland. For over 15 years, the victim had crop shared the land and was given a percentage of the yield after it was harvested. Later, the victim was approached by the suspect to change his trust and also lend the suspect $300,000 for the construction of a new house for his son. The victim cashed in some of his assets to accommodate that loan. The victim became suspicious when the suspect who leased the land did not provide a check for his percentage of the crop. In addition, when the victim went to pay his taxes on his land, he was told that he no longer owned it and that the suspect was on the land deed. The investigator conferred with local law enforcement. Eventually, the investigator was able to determine that the suspect, using undue influence, coerced the victim to sign paperwork returning the farm over to him rather than the living relatives as originally directed in the trust. The investigator learned that years earlier, the victim made the suspect his power of attorney due to health issues and never revoked that power after his recovery. The suspect, using the POA as part of the plan to get the house and land, was able to have the land transferred to him without the knowledge of the victim. The suspect was charged based on fraud and deceit, and a bench trial was held. The suspect was found guilty of the Class A felony of financial exploitation in the elderly of the disabled. Since April 2018, the Special Investigation Unit has submitted over 140 cases to prosecutors in the state and federal courts and were subsequently filed for abuse, neglect, or exploitation of the elderly and disabled. Over $8.8 million have been identified as stolen and recovered that belong to Missouri's vulnerable population.
Thank you, Jerry. Incredible work done by you and your colleagues, and yet another great example of what brings us here today to address these grave challenges. Tim, I was hoping you could kind of bring our panel home and help us wrap up here today. What can we do to mark and celebrate World Elder Abuse Awareness Day today, and for that matter, every day in the great state of Missouri?
Great question, Sarah. First off, you can wear purple on June 15th, which is actually World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Wear purple and take a photo and join the conversation by posting it on social media using the WeAdd hashtag. Of course, DHSS will be staging several photo opportunities across the state, including at the Wildwood campus on the stairs. We're also displaying purple pinwheels, flags, and ribbons throughout your community. We here at DHSS are displaying purple pinwheels along with banners and signs. We've placed pinwheels in the ground along with the banners in front of our buildings to represent the number of substantiated adult abuse reports respective to that county. We're also lighting up some landmarks. You can light up a landmark in your community or use a purple porch light during the month of June. You can also participate in a Walk for WeAdd event near you. For more information on Walk for WeAdd, go to health.mo.gov/WeAdd, and that's WEAAD. You can also share information about elder abuse and scam prevention. We hear of scams all the time and how they impact so many people. So be sure to share that along with other people so that they're aware and don't fall victim to scams. You can also call or visit an elderly friend, family member, or neighbor, as Christy mentioned, and also volunteer to help older adults in your community.
Thank you, Tim. Those are great examples on how we can mark this very special day. I want to thank all of our esteemed panelists today for joining us for this very important discussion to help mark and celebrate World Elder Abuse Awareness Day in Missouri and help us call attention to the global public health crisis. Before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to invite our listeners to join us in the many discussions happening around the great state of Missouri surrounding elder abuse as we continue to lead the way to ensure older adults live a safe and healthy life free from abuse, neglect, and exploitation. The National Adult Protective Services Association is hosting their 8th annual Global Summit for World Elder Abuse Awareness Day today, June 14th. This virtual WeAdd event can be live streamed until 3:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, and you can visit www.national.org health.napsa-now.org to enter the event. As the leader in promoting, partnering, and protecting the health of Missouri's citizens, the Department of Health and Senior Services encourages those who are qualified to help educate our communities, organizations, businesses, and individuals about elder abuse. For more information on World Elder Abuse Awareness Day and materials to share within your own community, please visit www.health.mo.gov/WEAD, and that's WEAAD. Again, thank you for joining us, and thank you for your participation.
Since 2006, June 15th has been designated as World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, a day that recognizes the significance of elder abuse as a public health and human rights issue. No community is immune from the mistreatment of older adults. Seniors and people with disabilities may be socially isolated and physically dependent on the perpetrator, often a son, a daughter, or other family caregiver, making it a complex and difficult situation to report. The Department of Health and Senior Services and I invite you to join us in building strong support for elders for World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, June 15th. If you suspect someone who is elderly or has disabilities is being abused, neglected, or financially exploited, report it to the Adult Abuse and Neglect Hotline at the link and number you see here on the screen.